When did you start riding?
I was born into a very, very horsey family. My dad was a point-to-point jockey and my mum evented, so it was always inevitable I was going to end up on a horse.
And you were women's champion point-to-pointing, were you?
2010 I was Yorkshire area novice ladies point-to-point champion, so I had quite a few winners and had a winner over hurdles at Wetherby as well, so that was a good season.
Okay, and how far did you go eventing?
I made it up to 3-star level. I went through the whole youth system of ponies, juniors and young riders, and then I was very fortunate in 2010 again. Some kind owners sent me a nice advanced horse and we got up to 3-star.
Now you're obviously doing Para Dressage. How did that come about?
Well, I broke my back not once but twice. So first time round was in 2007 and then I had a year off riding and got back riding and then pointing and eventing again and thought I was pretty indestructible and it would never happen again. And then in 2010 I had another fall and broke it again. Which led to me having 30 rods put in my spine, and I was basically told by the surgeons not to ride again. So I had to go and get a proper job in an office and step away from the horses, which was pretty tragic really, because horses were my life. And then I think 3.5-4 years passed of pretty miserable times. When horses are everything to you, suddenly they're completely out of your life, and I was pretty miserable. So then just one day out of nowhere I rang Mum up, who had the horses at home, and said, right, I'm coming home, I want to get on a horse again.
And what was the first horse you rode?
Somebody that Mum was teaching at the time had a nice coloured horse. He was kind of a 90-100 horse. He was called Bentley, and he was so safe, and they so kindly brought him over for me to have a sit on. But I was so wobbly and it felt completely different to what I ever had done before. And I was so weak and hunched over, and it was an odd feeling. And then I remember specifically when I had my first canter, this was a big milestone, I just burst into tears because it didn't feel like it did before at all. And that was quite upsetting, but then we had a few more practices and got more used to it.
How long did it take you from your first ride since your injury, well, your second injury, to doing your first test?
I think I got back on a horse in September 2013, and I did my first test. I went to Port Royal. I did an unaffiliated prelim in December 2013.
And when did you first start riding as a para in para competitions?
So I didn't know anything about paras. It was a completely different world to me. And when I started riding again, I obviously had to accept I couldn't event or point-to-point again. So Mum had done lots of research while I was off riding in the hope that one day I might get back on a horse again. And I kind of pulled out, it was like something out of a cartoon. She pulled a filing cabinet out and with reams and reams of paperwork about paras. So when I said I just dreamt of trotting down the centre line again, she said, oh, well, you could be a para. And I didn't know anything about it. So I was graded in December 2013, and then I did my first para competition in February 2014.
And how did you feel after you'd done your kind of first test?
It was so amazing. Before, when I was eventing, you went in, you just did your test, and it was just kind of a routine. You just did your test, whereas doing your first test again after all that time off, you appreciated it so much more, and it was a pretty surreal feeling, really.
Paras is something I knew absolutely nothing about, and Charlotte then had an accident and went away from riding for 3.5 years. I always hoped she would ride again, but never thought she would. And then she suddenly announced she desperately wanted to ride, and did I know anything about the paras? By this point I had done a bit of research, and it started from there, and that's about 2 years ago. And the first year she had a horse that really got her going again, but he was never quite going to be able to do it at this standard. And then we got the Chenko artist a year ago, who's been wonderful. But we met Alex Cahoon one day at horse trials, who asked Charlotte what she was doing. And she said, oh, I'm looking for another horse. I'm a para rider now, and I'm loving it. And Alex just said, oh, I think I might know of one. Nothing happened for about 6 months, because obviously Star at this point was still eventing. And then we were really lucky, went to Stoneleigh, and Chenko, the Chenko artist, who's our own horse, Charlotte won the KBIS Championship on the grade 4, and we met Liz Press that day, and Alex had talked to Liz, and it all started from there. And we've had the horse now about 6 weeks, and Charlotte is so excited because she's never had the opportunity to ride quite such a lovely horse. So how lucky we are. I cannot say really how tragic accidents can end up being the best results ever, because Charlotte, I think, is happier now than she's ever been, and always says she was never actually now go back to her racing or eventing. She's absolutely bitten with this. So something good always happens.